Question number 1. Do you support universal access membership and why?
If so.
If so.
Yeah. I definitely support it because I think that universal student unionism is a good thing. I think that it was a terrible thing when VSU came in.
Yeah.
And so I would like to do whatever we can to return to that kind of model. Unfortunately, you can't just promise universal access without seeing how SAFF is going to be distributed next year. We're still negotiating that, the SRC, the union, and although it's looking like universal access is a definite possibility, I wouldn't go into anything promising it. Also, if we promise universal access, which includes a discount, like current access cards, the union would likely lose about $2 million each year. I believe at the moment they take in $1 million from selling. I think they take in about $1 million from selling cards and lose about $500,000 from discounts. If you didn't sell the cards, you'd have more people using the discounts and none of that income from selling. So, yeah. But another model would be to have universal access, which means you can join clubs and societies without paying a fee, and a sort of a second tier for discounts. That wouldn't result in a huge loss, although it would mean less people buying the access cards. So, I don't know. I definitely support it, so long as it's feasible.
Okay. So, moving beyond that, do you support affirmative action as it currently stands? Why or why not?
In general, I'm supportive of anything that promotes, marginalised groups, and women are included in that. It can be a lot more difficult for women to get involved in politics and student politics. So I do support affirmative action in some cases. I think, though, that if we are doing affirmative action on union board, being a woman isn't as great a disadvantage as being of a low SES background or being queer or being, not white. So there's a lot of things that are being ignored. I think that I would either like to expand it so that we get more representation of those groups rather than simply women who might actually be wealthy and not that disadvantaged. So I do support the affirmative action, but I think that if we're going to be doing it, we can work to expand it more. Problem is, if we expand it to every marginalised group, then you end up just having one person from each group and you don't have an election. So I don't know where the balance should lie with that. But
you see room for improvement?
Yeah.
Okay. What is your attitude to fair trade, and have you signed the Fairly Educated contract?
I'm definitely supportive of fair trade.
Yeah.
I think that it doesn't go far enough. I would like to see higher standards with what gets certified as fair trade, but it's a great movement.
Yeah.
And I would like to see it expanded beyond simply coffee. The current plans are to do it for the coffee tender. But, say chocolate, we sell a lot of chocolate. And chocolate's one of the worst industries for workers' conditions. So I'd like to see it expanded to that. We already have some clothing. But any product that can be sourced through fair trade, I think it should be. I haven't signed the contract because I've received advice from the returning officer that it's not a good idea. Although, I'm not so sure because it's not a real contract as far as I'm aware.
Yeah.
So, I do fully intend to do everything that's included in that contract.
Yeah.
But if it, if it turns out to be financially disastrous, if it would shut down the union, then of course I won't do it. I haven't signed it, but I'm 100% behind fair trade.
Do you think that given the students, regardless of whatever the current standards are, voted so overwhelmingly in favour of fair trade in relation to coffee, that it therefore is intuitive that they would be supportive in other circumstances? Or do you think they would withdraw their support if it seemed as if that fair trade was spanning over things, which, I don't know, but you mentioned chocolate. Maybe in that instance, there's more brand association with specific types of chocolate that they might be less keen for?
Possibly. So say, if you want a Mars bar, that's made by slaves.
Yeah.
And most students, I think, would be upset about that if they were fully aware of how chocolate is produced by companies like Mars and Cadbury. But if they don't have that information, if you just place the choice in front of them and say fair trade, generic stuff, or a Snickers, they're going to go with Snickers. So I'd like to see some education before moving that way to try and get people on board. As for the referendum overwhelmingly showed support for fair trade. I think that sentiment does. It implies that it would be expanded to other products, not just coffee, because there's nothing particularly special about coffee that means you should source that ethically, but not other things. And so, I think, though, that rather than imposing my values, I definitely want to just do what the majority of students actually come to consensus on. So we should enforce a fair trade referendum no matter anyone on board's thoughts about it. And, I would like to see perhaps surveys, perhaps another referendum, although that's a bit of an imposition, to gauge people's thoughts on more fair trade products like chocolate.
Okay. Question 4. Are you a member of any political party? And if so, what do you see as the role of political parties in this election and in the union in general?
I'm a member of the Greens. I think that in the union, almost everyone that gets involved is political. A lot of them are members of political parties, even if they're not, they're often associated with them, or they draw support from bases associated with them. I guess in these interviews everyone will be truthful, but when it comes to selling policies, I'm the only person that's actually saying, yes, I'm left-wing, I'm a member of the Greens. The reason I'm doing that is every decision made by the union board is political. It's a joke to say that it's not. When you're deciding if you like fair trade, how you're going to prioritise different groups, whether you prioritise marginalised groups like queer students or groups that are already advantaged like college students, whether you fight the universities taking over student control, student services, or if you just go with it. All sorts of decisions, although they're not overtly political in the same way that the SRCs are, because it's a lobbying body, they're definitely political. In fact, even being part of the union as an organisation that draws funds from a large base to redistribute them for everyone's benefit. I mean, that's as far as I'm concerned, it's a socialist idea. And I'm very concerned that a lot of people that get involved in the union don't actually have the values that I think the union is meant to stand for. So, yes, I'm political. I think that the other candidates, their politics come into it, and I think everyone should talk about it more, because if we just hide behind it and say it's not about politics, we're not being honest with the voters.
So you'd like greater transparency on the behalf of other people running, so as to freely admit when not, if they are or aren't being backed? I
think so. I can't force anyone to...
No, it's just more your opinion,
Yeah.
Okay. So, on from there, why do you think that there are so few candidates running for board this year, other than in previous years, and how do you think that influences this year's election?
I'm really not sure why that's happened this year. Before the nominations closed, I was hearing rumours that it was something in the teens, a lot of people were running. Presumably some of them would be not so serious, but I thought the field would be a lot bigger. Maybe other people that were considering running heard the same thing and thought, oh, well, it'll be too difficult, and so a lot of people might have pulled out. Maybe that's why a lot of people aren't running. I don't know. I think it's generally a bad thing for democracy when you've got 7 people going for 5 positions. I would like to see a bigger field. I would like to encourage it.
Do you think a smaller field like we have this year will have a detrimental effect on the diversity of views that are available?
I think so. Although I find in union board elections, no matter how many candidates you have, there's sort of a dearth of diversity. But everyone plays the independent, fun-loving, not about politics card. And that's going to happen whatever size the field. But yes, in
But
general.
do you think in an election perhaps where it is bigger, like someone like you has got quite specific views and are like trying to be less general, perhaps in a larger field someone with a more specific and tailored policy may be able to do better than in a policy like than in the current state, where if you have a generic policy you are still quite likely to get a vote.
Yeah.
Do you understand? Because there's no differentiation between X Labor candidate and Y Labor candidate, for example.
Yes, if you've got a bigger field, then the amount of votes that will go to each person is much lower. The quotas low. So if you have a driven, like policy heavy campaign that differentiates yourself from the others, then it's easier to actually pick things up. I'm not complaining in that sense because that's kind of the campaign that I'm running. I don't think that it's going to disadvantage me in a small field. I just think generally large fields are better for more choice. Yeah.
Okay. So how do you view the negotiations that have taken place between the union and the university over the last 2 years in regards to control of commercial operations?
Well, I think they've done pretty well. Like, the union is still independent.
Yeah.
So that's good. I'm furious at the university for trying to abridge that independence. And although the current wave of negotiations has ended, it's still continuing sort of by proxy with the SAFF negotiations. It's not a separate issue, it's a continuation of that tension between the university and the union. And it could become more of it this year or next year. I'm not sure. If I am involved in negotiations between the union and the university, I will push very strongly for student control of student affairs. And my approach, as well as actual negotiation, because I'm used to that, I speak to the Vice-Chancellor in negotiations. I think activism is something that the union misses. The Are You With Us campaign is nice, but it's very much commercial and top-down. It's not really it wasn't a student movement. I think, like, I've got experience in the staff cuts campaign, other grassroots campaigns like that. I think that something like that could make the university back off the next time that they try and screw with the union.
How would you go about engendering as you said, like a movement from the ground up, if you were on board and you use your position on the board to galvanise the supporters of the union?
So I can't go into any specifics because I don't know what form the campaign would take. I don't know what form the attack by the university would take. But rather than, say, going to the marketing department and saying, okay, you've got to design a campaign to... Basically, students didn't view that. It was sort of a farce that the university is supposed to take notice and think, oh, students are all on board with this. I don't think they did. They recognised that it's just a marketing ploy. Rather than doing that, I would actually send out to everyone on the union mailing list or whatever an invitation to actually get involved in a campaign, rather than being told, here's the campaign that you're going to be supporting. Actually get ideas from the membership, because they're the people that matter for the union. It's not the marketing department.
So you'd be advocating for a kind of board of directors trying to engage with, trying to get ideas from the membership, as opposed to, I guess, how you could characterise the current approach, which was a board of directors coming up with an idea and then giving it, imposing it on the membership. Yeah.
Both because that's a better, more democratic process, and you're more likely to engage the membership if they feel that they've had input into the process.
Do you think this change in approach towards perhaps how you would act on board would be quite difficult to go about starting to do, given that it is and has been sort of the role of the union to have this top-down approach, and by the sounds of what the other candidates are saying, also have you to that particular approach? How do you see yourself fitting in a field of people who view things differently?
Well, obviously, I can't force the union to take my approach. I'll be only one person on the board out of a large group, and So I would actually have to convince other people. I think that I can do that simply by being someone on there to offer that perspective. No, it might not have happened in previous years, and if only people were aware that there are alternatives, then they might have done it differently. I am used to dealing with people who have different views, like in the SRC. Not everyone agrees with my policies, but I am able to negotiate to find consensus.
So further to that, what do you think about the SAFF breakdown? Do you think it was a fair breakdown? And what do you think about the unions?
I think the SAFF breakdown was completely fucked. For starters, SAFF money shouldn't have replaced historical funding. We should have gotten historical funding and then SAFF be in addition to that. Because the way it's worked, there's been barely any net increase in student services, but there's been a massive increase in fees. What SAFF has amounted to at Sydney has been just a hike in fees. It's different at some other universities. They've actually gotten a lot of funding in addition. I think UTS, like their SRC, they doubled their budget, something like that. That would have been great for the SRC here, Supra, and the union. As to the actual breakdown, the allocations, I think that Sydney Uni Sports and Fitness shouldn't have gotten a cent because they're not run by students. The meetings that I sit in, the Student Consultative Committee, their leader, Bruce, he's like 70. To characterise that as consulting students is a joke. I have nothing against the guy personally, but they are very different to, say, the union or Supra, which have students at the top and they run services exclusively for students or staff as well, in the case of the union. Sydney Uni Sports and Fitness has other streams of income. They offer, gym membership to community members. And since they've gotten this, the larger slice of the pie, they haven't actually reduced their fees for students. They haven't given any additional stuff to students. They've continued with their same...
So there's been no flow-on effect for students?
No. It's been a complete waste of money. They got, I think, 3.9 million, and, they shouldn't have gotten anything.
Okay. Now, obviously, it's been talked about on your Facebook page, the potential conflict of interest between your role as Vice President of the SRC and as a union board member, potential union board member. How would you negotiate this conflict of interest?
Yes. I was going to say also, we've asked the same question to Karen and
we're not just
to John about their general executive positions.
So how would you negotiate that conflict of interest, and how would you resolve trying to, when it comes specifically to SAFF allocation, to trying to get the maximum amount of funding for each organisation?
Well, like you brought up, Karen and John are also on executive, so they would have similar conflict of interest. I think James Flynn, Mel Brooks, Nay, have all been on executive and union board. So things like this have arisen in the past. There are multiple ways to approach it. One would be to simply recuse myself from negotiations entirely and not vote on any interorganisational matters. I will do that in some situations where I think there actually is a conflict, which I think is the tradition that other people in that situation have followed. But also, my approach to SAFF would be to give all of the student organisations more money, because I think we got screwed over, and to cut out sport. So that's something where there's not a conflict of interest between the SRC and the union, but a convergence of interest. Somewhere that we can work together. And I think having a role in both organisations would help make those negotiations go smoother.
Early today, John has indicated to us that if he were elected to the union board, he would resign in his position as executive of the SRC. What is your opinion on this matter?
That's up to him. I think that I still care about the SRC, And I think that it would be partially irresponsible to the people. I mean, I wasn't directly elected by voters, but by proxy I was.
Yeah.
I think it would be irresponsible to students to step down from the SRC and let someone, I'm not sure who it would be, but someone possibly less competent fill that role. Because the conflict of interest isn't actually that great. It comes up in SAFF slightly, but the vast majority of the operations of the SRC and of the union, there's no conflict of interest whatsoever. So I wouldn't find that necessary, but it's up to other people how they deal with it.
What I
also,
sorry.
Like, my term as SRC Vice President will only last a
6
few...
months.
Yeah, there's not a huge overlap. For most of my term as a Union Board Director, I wouldn't have both roles. So, yeah.
Moving forward from there, do you think you would be a good negotiator in these circumstances? Could you just briefly list some reasons why you've touched on it a bit before?
Well, yes, I'm an experienced negotiator. I sit in Student Consultative Committee with the Vice Chancellor every month. At the recent meeting, I brought up changing the representation on Senate to have less of a focus on alumni and more on staff and students because they're stakeholders. And I also brought up changing the way the vote is conducted. Online elections are notoriously bad for a number of reasons. And Spence was, despite generally being an unreasonable person, I would think, was open to that. And I'm able to have a conversation with him, even though I find, the actions of the university with the staff cuts and so on reprehensible. I don't let that cloud my judgment when I'm negotiating on other things. And, well, yes, I have negotiating experience.
Sustainable and or profitable venture. I know one of your policies explicitly states that you want a less corporate
union.
By sustainable, do you mean financially sustainable or environment?
Financially, yeah.
Well, I think that financial sustainability in individual outlets is the wrong way of looking at it. The point of the union is that some of them don't actually need to be run at a profit because they're providing a service. Some obviously do need to be run at a profit because if none of them do, then the union will collapse. I don't think that there's a conflict between being less corporate and being sustainable. Being less corporate means I would do away with a lot of the top-down structure that we have. So I would like to see workplace democracy as an example, people electing their managers rather than the board appointing someone who appoints someone and so on. I would like to see more outlets directly controlled by the union because we can control how well we treat our staff, where we source our products, and we can actually provide, things tailored specifically to students. Whereas, say, McDonald's treats their staff like shit. They buy their products from unethical sources and so on. So, being less corporate, it doesn't mean unprofitable. It just means changing the internal structures. That's basically my idea.
Okay, so as a broader question, what do you see as the purpose of the USU?
Well, the purpose of the USU is to help its members have a more fulfilling university life. I guess the way it developed was the university wasn't able to provide things as well. It's better for students to control their own services. Is that it?
Yeah, no, we're still good.
Because students know students better than staff do. And so the purpose of the union is to, provide those social things. But it's also in the Constitution things like the union is meant to be environmentally sustainable and environmentally friendly stuff I don't think has been focused on so much. People have skewed the role of the union into a particular form where it's about parties and it's about drinking, and I love drinking, but there is a lot more to the union. We're supposed to be, while providing services, doing it in an ethical way, because students do care about global warming, students care about fair trade. So I think the union is an opportunity to run a business in a way that benefits its members and does so in a more ethical way than you would get if it was run for profit and not controlled by students.
Do you think that being so open about your position on the political spectrum and obviously being a left-wing candidate in this election, do you think you will polarise voters more so than other candidates, and do you think that is a good or a bad thing?
Well, yes, I will polarise voters. Some people hate me. Some say, I should step down from the race because I was involved in a protest. And to those people I say, fine, don't vote for me. A lot of people think that I'm a good candidate because I was involved in protests. I think polarising voters is fine because it means people actually vote according to what they want instead of based upon unknowns. I think I would like to have left-wing people vote for me, and then I have legitimacy in when I try and implement my values and their values on board. I think that if I hid behind a smokescreen and maybe didn't upset anybody and went with the apolitical angle and then got onto board, but then started implementing all these left ideas, that would be dishonest. I don't want to do that.
Okay. So why do you think you're qualified for a position on the USU? Obviously, you've talked about your keen involvement in student affairs from an SRC perspective.
And an advocacy group as well.
Yeah. Is there anything else you'd like to add to that?
Oh, well, I've been a member of the USU from day one. I'm a student here. And although I haven't been as involved in, reviews and other clubs and societies things, I think that in a way that's an opportunity to involve people that the union doesn't traditionally engage. Like I've always been a member of the USU, but I haven't felt that I've gotten so much out of it because I haven't, it's been very corporate, it's been focused towards what I see as college kids. So yes, I don't have some of that stuff, but I think in a way that makes me more qualified to be on board because I can start to implement things to engage more people. And yes,
and people who would traditionally fall outside of the union's regular net.
Yes, people that the union should be engaging but can't.
You mentioned colleges specifically. Obviously, the interests of on-campus residents are important. But more to that, do you think that colleges have been given a historical privilege in union board elections, or where do you think that problem stems from? Just their background?
I don't think they've been privileged overtly, but a lot of the people that get onto union board come from a wealthy background. And basically, marginalised groups deserve to be given a boost. And colleges are not one of those. They do need services, they're students as well. But I don't think that most of the people in college require some of the services that the union would like to offer them. Inter-college sport, I don't see that as valuable. Or if it is valuable, they can pay for it out of, their daddy's trust fund. I don't hate the colleges. I have friends in college, but they too feel that they don't need anything extra from the union.
Okay. So we're almost out of time, so we'll kind of rush through these ones. Which current board member do you admire the most, and why?
The current board members?
Yeah.
That's hard. I like a few of them. Possibly Nay, because she hasn't shied away from politics. And that's really what I'm about. I think that we should be talking more about politics because the union is about politics. And she's been honest about that. So, I admire her for that.
Which of the other candidates, who do you think would next make the best board director after yourself?
Why?
Well, it's difficult because in many ways I'm very far from all of them. Yeah, possibly John. Like, I know him from SRC stuff, and he seems like a very nice guy and competent. Like, he is measured in his decision making, and I think that he would be a good person.
Cool. So final question, just before we ask you a quick question about your policies. If you were elected, who would you vote for President of the Union?
Well, we don't know who the candidates necessarily are.
Sure.
So, yeah. And I can't make any promises ahead of time. Unless
at this stage?
Yeah. Not at this stage, I don't know. Like, there's quite a few people on board that I respect. And
Has anyone approached you?
No one has approached me saying, I am running for president, would you vote for me? I'm sure that will happen, possibly during the campaign or immediately afterwards. My priority, whoever I vote for, is to have a union that stays independent and is as left-wing and inclusive as possible. And
to confirm, you are not receiving any aid from any of the current union board directors?
I've gotten a bit of advice from a few of them, like Nay, even James Flynn gave me some advice. I didn't seek it. But no member of my campaign team is a current board director.
So, finally, do you think that, like, for example, your policy of no special privileges for corporate sponsors and OWIC, do you think that particular benefit is one which would dissuade potential corporate sponsors from sponsoring OWIC? Could that potentially detract from it?
It might slightly, but really, I mean, if you've got the opportunity to have a stall with thousands of people walking past, you're not going to pass that up. I think that we would definitely continue to have corporate sponsorship, even if we treat corporations the same way we treat students. Really, I see that the priority is the union is about its members, and outside corporations are not members, so they shouldn't receive special privileges, even if it does mean a small loss.
And in regard to your policies on sustainability, do you see them as complementary to the funding structure of the union, or something that we would make a concession for to
environmental sustainability?
Like solar panels and stuff like that.
Solar panels require an initial investment, but eventually they'll end up paying for themselves because you don't have to buy power. As for others, like better recycling facilities, bike racks, recycled and recyclable packaging, things like that, most of them have very small costs. So yes, we wouldn't make money off them, but I think they're part of what the union should be providing to its members. So yeah, it's part of the program we should already have.
Cool. Thanks for your time.